Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Live with Obsessed. I'm Annette, and the lovely lady sitting on the other side of the screen is the incredible Jade Read. She's a mum of 3 boys, like hats off, photographer, artist, burlesque dance teacher, she didn't add that one in, and mental health advocate. Jade, how you doing?
I'm good. Had a wonderful day today, so.
Oh, excellent. Well, you are in the middle of renovating a house, so it's probably a good time to talk about self-care because it's one of the most mental things I can think of anyone doing.
Yeah, it has been good, actually. I've managed to thrive through it, but I think there's a few reasons for that. I'm an interior designer and decorator at heart, and I've done all those sorts of studies, and it's something that I love already. I actually finally got to do something I love instead of learn about it. So it was quite a fun experience. You need patience.
Well, you are the mother of 3 boys. I think that you would have patience in spades.
Maybe. No.
Maybe
I
not.
don't really. It takes a lot of effort.
Oh, 2 boys is enough. 3, it's like, whoo. So
yeah,
we're going to have a pretty serious conversation tonight because you wanted to talk about mental health and self-care. Would you mind telling the listeners a little bit about your journey to this point and some of the things that you've had to struggle with and be challenged with to be the human we see in front of us?
Yes, we are having a big chat tonight, and it is something I feel quite passionately about. My family history has a huge amount of mental health issues and suicide on both sides of my biological family. I was brought up by my aunt and uncle in their family with their 3 children. I was the 4th edition when I was about 6 years old. Because my mum and dad split, neither of them could care for me by themselves due to mental health issues, as well as my dad was a truck driver, and that isn't exactly a way that you can bring up a child. And my mum chose. She said that she knew that she couldn't take care of me, and she wanted a good life for me. So she went ahead and asked my aunt and uncle if they would actually bring me up because they knew they could give me a life better than she could, which was obviously incredibly, incredibly hard for her to do. And then I've grown up that way. And then my aunt and uncle also divorced in my teens, and there's another split family. And my aunts, my uncles, my grandparents mostly have all suicided. There have been a few natural deaths. In saying that, but a lot of them have had depression and anxiety and bipolar and all sorts of mental health concerns. So it has been something that's been a part of my life literally forever. And then I thought I was doing great, and even going through puberty and everything seemed fine. Nothing seemed to come up. Often for girls, it's hard for, it's a little bit more difficult to identify some of those things when girls have those sort of mental health and hidden illnesses. But nothing showed through puberty other than some mood swings. Nothing crazy, kind of normal.
That happens.
But coming up to when I got married and I started having children, things started changing, and I didn't realize how bad it was until like this year, really. So I've ended up having to deal with my own postnatal depression issues, some anxieties, and now 2 of my children have some hidden mental illnesses, which was kind of devastating to me. I was hoping that I was kind of brought up with this whole idea of, you can change the cycle, Jade, and all these sorts of things that really aren't quite true. You can't do anything about these things. Like, it's not like anybody chooses to have depression or would choose to suffer from anxiety. It's not something you want. And it's definitely not something you want for your children. But I was kind of brought up with this whole thing of like, I'm going to be this great, amazing, heroic person. I'm going to change all of these mental health cycles just because I don't know why even.
So when you found out that your boys also had some mental health issues, did that make you feel like that you had failed or you'd done something wrong?
I felt like a complete failure. And it's not even it's so hard to really get my head around the fact, well, it was at the time really difficult for me to figure out that this had nothing to do with me. It felt like it had everything to do with me. It had everything to do with my family history. It's not possible to escape it, is what it felt like. And now I've got to figure out what to do about my kids having it, because I didn't as a kid. I knew my family had it, and all of those sorts of things have impacted me. But now that I'm aware that my children have some anxieties and some ASD, Asperger's and things like that, now what do I do? How do I do? I've never dealt with that before either, let alone I hadn't even dealt with myself at the time either. So it was quite a struggle to sort myself out, as well as at the same time trying to sort my son out. It's been incredibly challenging.
It'd feel like you'd stood in line and someone had smacked you around the head with a bat and gone, wow, I didn't expect that.
Yeah, yeah. It was. Yeah, I'm thinking just bringing up all these things that happened, and before we had figured out what was happening with my son, he was starting to destroy classrooms and he was trashing them. And I had never, I had heard of obviously children dealing with a lot of these sorts of things, but knowing what it's like for a parent to walk into a situation and go, what is going on, and not know. Sure, this isn't normal. What am I supposed to do with this? It felt like a complete, I was the worst parent in the world, because I should know what's going on. I should know my son. And it wasn't happening that way at all.
Do you think the way that we're with the media and, all of these ways that we get information, that as parents we're almost set up to fail, because we're fed this ideal of what the perfect child looks like, and when your kid doesn't fit that mold, then it's like, what do I do now?
Yeah, it is I'm not sure where it sort of originates from. I can see in a lot of social media and medias we're presented with very well-behaved, normal children. Do what they ask, like these ads of perfect kids eating cereal and not spilling milk on the floor and like putting just, and their houses look lovely and perfect and everything's all in place. And it's kind of like a stylized, romanticized version of, oh dear, there's laundry on the table. But it's still presented in a good-looking way. It's so stylized. It's not someone's actual house, and it's not someone's actual response. So I think when we're fed images, and particularly in social media, when we see kids out, we always, I share photos of my kids out on the beach, running around, having a good time. I'm not taking photos of my kids when they're completely distraught and on the floor and throwing things at each other. I feel like
magazines.
I do see a lot of raw authenticness coming through with family and friends on Facebook. That when, shit's hit the fan, we've had a crappy day, we do put it up. But I think it's more to do with how we were raised as kids. We were either raised and been told, I didn't raise you like that, you know better than that, do this, do that, and everything will be better. So we're sort of raised with either, here's how to be the perfect kid, you do what I tell you, or you're raised with an incredibly awful situation where you go, well, I don't want any of that for my kid, I'm going to do it this way. So if I do everything opposite to my parents, I'll have good kids. Whereas we're not really going for, I think it's more to do with how we were raised rather than what the media is giving us. I think what the media gives us tells us, well, you're wrong and you need to buy this and that'll make it better. But I think inside our heads, we are given an ideal of what a good child is supposed to be from our parenting, from the people who parented us. I think that works for me.
It sounds good to me. Have you found, since you've accepted your challenges, that helping your children through theirs is a little bit easier?
Way easier. I've got to say, there are so many benefits to having to work through the struggles of mental health, that we are equipped with so much more to be able to give our kids in terms of their strugglings with something, whether they have a diagnosis or don't. just general behaviors, just how our kids relate to the world. We have ways to help them do that. So my kids said the other day that, oh, this is better than that. I'm like, nothing's better than anything else. Everything's just different. Yours better, your strength is this and this kid's strength is that. So we're a lot more aware of how to approach behaviors, how we regulate ourselves so we can help our children regulate themselves.
I find it interesting because you know that I have a son on the spectrum as well. And I often look at his journey through school and think that he has been so critiqued and criticised and what have you by the school system for how he behaves, that as a teenager, I actually find that the way that he interacts with other people is far more superior than his peers who've just kind of like plodded on through, they've been a good kid, they study hard. Whereas Quinn is just so more observant about how he interacts that it almost seems like a superpower to me now that, he's learnt. Do you see that happening with your kids because they have to be so aware of, how they're responding, how they're interacting with other people, that they're a little bit more switched on to what's going on?
Yeah, I do find my oldest is really good at that. And he doesn't have a diagnosis or anything, but he certainly does have his quirks. And if we did take him through the diagnosis process, he would like Asperger's as well. But you don't have to get a diagnosis, even if you feel like there could be one, they might have something. It's not necessary to even go get a diagnosis. There could be a whole who are, perfectly easily managed in terms of their learning and behaviors because they might just be a more placid child. It really depends on each child. Connor, unfortunately, just had a really bad trot and we ended up getting him diagnosed. Back to the question, yes, my oldest son, it's incredible how much our children, this is something that I didn't really notice until probably a year ago, how much our children truly take on from watching us and observing us instead of what we tell them. It's incredible. So I can see when my son is acting like me because he's taken my behaviors, observed them, and thought, okay, well, that's what I need to do to be able to deal with this situation, particularly with his younger brother. So I can hear my voice in him speaking when he's talking to Connor about something, trying to get his dad's attention. Like, oh, wow, I really have to be so aware of how I speak to my children, not what I say, how I speak to them. I was a yelling parent beforehand. I would yell and scream till the cows came home and then I'd just leave. I'd walk out. Not ideal because that's what they're learning. They do. They will not listen to a word you say, but they will pay attention and observe what you're doing and then take it with them. So my son learns to interact with the people around him by how I interact with the people around me. It's a complete direct link. It's incredible. And I love it because he is so mature, probably a lot like Quinn. So much mature when he's working through a situation, not when he's trying to have a conversation because he just doesn't have that actual maturity level, but he's taken my maturity, like he's probably just reflecting my maturity out of the way how I speak to how he deals with it. He'll say the same things or he'll speak in the same tone that I have spoken because he knows that's how it works for me, so that's how it'll work for him. It's really cool to watch.
Yeah, it is cool to watch, isn't it? Because you kind of think, you know what, kid, you've had to deal with so much and you're just coming out shining. It's like quite amazing to watch.
It's pretty cool to watch.
Now, with your mental health issues, what was the thing that like triggered you to go, you know what, I don't want to live like this anymore. I need to do something?
It was a gradual downturn. I can't say that there was a actual point where I'm like, okay, things have got to change. I had all three children already, and things kept happening between home and school. And I would always get to school, and I would just kind of break down, or the kids wouldn't get out of the car, or the kids, like, it's all these tiny, tiny little things. And they build and they build and they build and they build. And and then I would just explode. And I don't know how often I was in someone's office at the school crying because it was just all too hard and I didn't want to be a parent and I didn't want to have kids. That has just been a constant thing for me since I had kids, started having children that I wanted because we chose to have kids, and I don't want to have them anymore. I don't want to be a parent anymore. Everything is too hard. The smallest of things is too hard. And I would just be crying. And then this one particular day, I had been up there for probably a good 2 hours in this person's office, and I still hadn't calmed down. I was still crying. I was still saying I didn't want to go home with my son because the other two were at school and I had one at home with me. And they said, look, we don't feel safe with you going home with your son right now. Can we call you an ambulance so you can go to the hospital? And I'm like, well, that's an overreaction. Of course I don't want to go to hospital. I'm fine. I'm trying to like put myself back together to go, that's just a complete overreaction. No one's, other people who are dying on the road need an ambulance. I don't need an ambulance. I sat there and they still really weren't letting me go home. And I just sat there and like, because they weren't going to do anything about it unless I consented, obviously. So I'm like, oh, well, maybe if I go to the hospital, somebody will take it a bit more seriously. And maybe something more will be done about me, because currently I don't want to have my kids, so somebody else can have them. It's basically what I was thinking. So I agreed to, I think I agreed to the ambulance, and they called one, and Ethan came with me, my youngest, and we went to hospital, and they called my husband, and obviously he's going to panic because his wife's just been taken in an ambulance to the hospital for mental health problems. So from the hospital, it was just all of that. And my son hadn't even started destroying classrooms at that time, so I still hadn't hit rock bottom. I was still declining. But I thought, oh, you know what? They are being kind of pushy about this. I really don't think they're going to let me go home. Why don't I just go and see if they'll take me seriously and see what help or support I can find going through this avenue. That's kind of what happened.
So before that, you'd been trying to cope with this by yourself?
Just trying to cope with life and not really knowing or wanting to admit that I was yelling and screaming. I was sad all the time. I was crying a lot. And and my husband and I would have these talks and go, maybe it's just part of your cycle that, you get a bit more hormonal around your cycle. And I'm like, I don't know, but surely I shouldn't be, breaking down crying in mental breakdowns every 3 or 4 weeks. Like, that doesn't seem good or healthy.
That doesn't seem, that just like, how can you live like that?
I don't think that's good. And so we would have conversations about it and go, oh, no, you're coping really well. And then my husband would, ask how the day was, and I might tell him the whole thing was shit. And it's like, well, was the whole thing crappy, or was it just some parts that you just haven't got past? And then I'd think about it, because my husband's actually done really well in helping me become a bit more self-aware of how the day's going and how my moods are traveling. He would always ask great questions like that. And I'm like, okay, well, all right, well, maybe it isn't so bad, because it wasn't the whole day. It was just this small thing that triggered me. But if a small thing triggers me this much and my response is this big, it's not an appropriate response to the issue. So there's still problems, and I guess I just wasn't really putting a whole lot of pieces together. So it just kept going like that for quite some time, and then my son started deteriorating at school. What happened for him? He had what did he do? He had an ear infection. That's what happened. He had an ear infection, and we didn't know. So for some reason, for Connor, he is not able to tell us that he's in any sort of pain until it's like he must have a really incredibly high pain threshold until it's like an 8, 9 out of 10. And then it's just an emergency. We don't get the early warnings to deal with things earlier, which really sucks. So he had an ear infection, and we didn't know. And he went to school, and teacher said, you need to do this before you can move on to some other thing. And he lost it, and he trashed a classroom. And we're like, we have no idea what's going on here. He got suspended, he comes home, and then one night, middle of the night, he's like, ow, my ear, ow, I can't, it hurts. I'm like, oh, okay. Off to the doctor first thing. He'd blown his eardrum.
Oh, my God, that's so painful.
He blew a hole in his eardrum. That's how bad it was, and he didn't tell us there was a single thing wrong before then.
Oh, poor darling.
Oh, poor kid. So obviously he got to stay home from school from that. His ear healed, everything was fine. He's gone back to school, and that behavior kept going. He kept trashing classrooms because he didn't want to do things. And we're like, okay, the ear infection's gone. This shouldn't be happening anymore. But he kept doing it, and they kept suspending him. So he had like 3 suspensions in, I don't know, a month maybe, less. Probably 4 suspensions. I don't even remember. It was a blur. And I was starting to get the help, but hadn't gotten all of the supports yet. So he's having breakdowns in the classroom. I'd come up to the school. I'd have more breakdowns because A, I can't get my work done because I work from home. B, I can't deal with just standard life, let alone escalated life. I'm trying to avoid using the word normal because there isn't really such a thing.
True.
He's mentally breaking down. I'm mentally breaking down. And that was kind of rock bottom. And then I started onto some morbid thoughts and almost suicidal tendencies just before Christmas last year as well, because everything was just completely imploding. Nothing was working. And I felt like I had to deal with everything myself. It was crappy.
That sounds really crappy. What got you through? Like, what was the thing that got you through?
What got me through was I built a very purposeful network around me. The people who I brought into my world of support were useful people, not just my best friend or the parent or the sister or anything like that. It was a purpose-built group. And it's really important to build this network very, very purposefully with a lot of awareness. The hospital put me in touch with something called the Benevolent Society, and they have been nothing but incredibly supportive. I have a lady who comes to see me every week, and she knows the kids, she knows me, and we go through anything we need to go through, which meant she put me in touch with, we got Connor into child psychology, a psychologist, and we took him through the NDIS process, got his diagnosis, and so, like, she'll do the practical stuff. She will sit down with me and we will go through the Centrelink stuff on the computer together because I'm not going to do that by myself. That's too overwhelming, and I just avoid it and ignore it and just like, no, we've got to do this done. We need to get phone calls. She'll make a phone call. If I don't want to make the phone call, she'll call the doctor for me. She'll make an appointment with the pediatrician. She'll make an appointment with a psychologist, whoever it is. So she will always help me do the action things that need to be done to help move me forward. She's awesome. We also got myself into my own psychologist, a different psychologist entirely, and has always encouraged me to make sure, like, I've avoided going onto medications previously. Some people have said, why don't you go on antidepressants? You know, I'm like, I don't want to, because it just felt like this whole stigma attached to it. And my mum was on them, and my aunts and uncles and everybody who was suicided was on them. So, like, how useful is that anyway? I'm on them, and they're awesome. And they help.
Boom.
Just, you know, when you get to rock bottom and, you know, if there's been some things that are holding you back because of some stigma or somebody said something and you don't want to do something, if you've just gotten to the rock bottom and I just got to the point where I'm like, just anything. I'll try anything. If you think it'll help, I'll do it. I don't care anymore. Just let go of any preconceived ideas of anything, because I need something to help me, and I don't care what it is now. There is a point where you're just going to go, don't even care. Just help.
Well, you just want to be well. You just want to be well,
and
don't you?
that is, you just want to be well. And I think that is a crucial point right there. Just somebody tell me what to do and I'll do it. Give me the help. And that's really a turning point to go, okay, well, fine, I'll try whatever you got there. Don't know if it's going to work or not, but it can't get much worse, so let's try. You need to be able to open up to that. I think that, you know, step one is to, what is it? Admit you've got a problem.
Yep. Acceptance.
Acceptance. That's really important to actually be able to go, you know what? Just help me.
Yeah, I think that's so important, isn't it? It's almost like owning where you're at. Doesn't matter where you're at, because if you go, this is really shitty, and, you know, I don't believe we're put on the planet to suffer. is that, if you can go, what joy am I missing out on life by not doing these things because of, like you said, preconceived idea or stigma? Like, how much better do you feel?
I feel amazing. Everything has changed. I feel so great, like that inner contentment and happiness, no matter how shitty things are going. I think what also helped is when we're just mentioning the renovations. I sorted myself out before we started the renovations, and we actually, with my GP, we raised, I'm on a super low dosage, but we just raised my medication dosage just a little, knowing that A, the restrictions were coming, B, I'm renovating.
One of the most stressful things that you can do.
Yeah. So we actually looked ahead and planned and thought, okay, well, the next 6 months are going to be a little more stressful than normal. Let's just raise it just a smidge, just temporarily, to get you through that period. And I'm probably going to be seeing my doctor soon to come back down because I don't need it.
Down. So given that you've spent most of your life worrying and stressing and filled with anxiety about what's happening or not happening, what are the things that you do now to love yourself, that you've got this bit of space where you can go, you know what, actually I'm really important?
This is my favorite thing to talk about because it's been a recent realization about how self-care works for me. I was brought up, massages are just self-indulgent, things like that you never do anything for yourself. So anything you do end up doing for yourself, I did carry a whole lot of guilt about. But self-care for me, things I do for myself. I'm a creative person. I'm an artsy person. I'm a photographer. So I'll pick up my camera. I'll go out and take my camera. I don't even care what I'm photographing sometimes. I'll just play with something different. I'll go close. I'll go far. I'll do landscapes. Nope, little man, off you. Arts, anything colouring in, anything paint, anything pencils. Here's Ethan.
Hey, Ethan.
Hello.
How you going?
Good. You got to go. I'm making.
We're almost done. Then you can have Mum back.
Yeah, Dad. Bye. You told you.
Because if you stay, you have to answer questions.
You got to go. Go see Dad.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Nice. He's the cuddly one. Lots of art, lots of colour, lots of pencils, chalk, anything that is artsy. Music, mostly art. Art is what I do. Art is me. Art is me. So when I see all these like cliched ideas of self-care, of lounging around in the big bathtub or going to get the massage or haircuts or the drinks of wine. I don't like wine, really. I don't like coffee. Like none of that does anything for me. And it just seems like anytime you say self-care, it's about, that's what it's kind of about. It's about lazing around somewhere on a beach or, you know, all of these luxuriously skincare-y things that I like, but they don't actually feed my soul enough to say, hey, you're in a good mood now. Doesn't work that way for everyone. For some people, skincare is self-care. For some people, the bath is self-care. For me, a bath isn't really self-care. It's uncomfortable. My neck gets hurt and sore because it's always leaning. And I don't fit the bathtub. For me, self-care is painting, picking up the brush. I don't know. My sister loves baths. She loves baths. I get her like the bath soaps and bath bombs. That's all her. She's all about that for our self-care, but I'm not. It's just, yeah, I just find the media gives us this really narrow version of what self-care looks like. And we don't have to subscribe to that version of self-care if it actually isn't feeding us. We need to be more aware of what is actually feeding us those overflowing hormones that we're going to fill our cup, give us some overflow, and then we're full. We're able to take that out to our family. And it just, yeah, I do find that that's such a narrow view of self-care. And I think we can help ourselves out more if we pay more attention to what is going to actually feed us rather than going, oh, well, that's, I guess having a coffee means I'm caring for myself. is it? Are you paying attention to it? Are you sitting down and going, ah, yes, I finally get my coffee? Or is it the fourth time you've warmed it up and you still haven't drunk it? That's not so fair, because you're not doing anything for yourself there.
Good point.
For everyone.
Jade, look, thank you. An incredibly courageous and brave conversation that we've just had. And I so appreciate your willingness to talk about a really hard topic for even you to talk about, but maybe for other people to listen. But you've said some really awesome points. And and for those that I know Jade, so I have seen her going through the hard times, and I know that the woman who's sitting in front of me is a very different person to the one I had a wine with last year.
Yeah, it wasn't that long ago, hey.
It wasn't that long ago.
The first time I've actually spoken out loud to anywhere public about my experiences in my family and how low my low was. So I'm surprised I did all right without crying even once.
You did a beautiful job. Thank you. I'm so proud of you. And if anybody out there is struggling with mental health, mental illness, please reach out to someone, Lifeline, the Benevolent Society, someone you know and care for. Reach out and just let them know that you need some help like Jade did. Jade, thank you very much for joining us tonight. You're a rock star.
Thanks, Annette.
Oh, hang on just one moment. I've got to share this. Naomi, beautiful Naomi from Western Australia said thank you. It was beautiful. And it was.
Naomi.
Good night, everybody, and join me next time.